Thank you, Sue, for this great opportunity to sort of present on this platform. I think the topic that I'm talking about today is something that's very close to my heart, and something that I work quite a lot with my clients. I don't know whether by default that is due to the culture and the upbringing that I have, that I tend to do a lot of work in the South Asian community. And it's really about the impact of a sense of shame that I think is relevant across any cultural religion. I think there can be a sense of internal shame that exists there. Really, what I really wanted to discuss today was how culture, religion can help keep us stuck in decision. So that I'll start. I do apologize in advance for any noise in the background. I am actually currently at an airport terminal in the lounge, so hopefully we'll be good, but I'd like, just in case we do get any interruptions, hopefully we won't. So I think, you know, when we're considering leaving a marriage, you know, we all know this is a significant life-changing event. And once we've come to that initial decision, obviously there's lots of decisions that then have to be made around finances and assets, and how we're going to share the children, where we're going to live, all of these, you know, significant changes, decisions that then have to be made. And, you know, this is not a small decision. You know, nobody decides to leave a marriage on a whim. You know, very often, you know, I've yet to work with any client who hasn't spent weeks, months, or even years agonizing over the decision before they finally take that crucial step. And, you know, it gives rise to so many different heightened emotions that we're going to experience during that period. And, you know, we often, like, I suppose we know there are numerous reasons why a couple may decide to part ways when they've come to that decision. And here are just, you know, a couple of, I suppose, you know, we're probably all familiar with friends or family, or even with ourselves, the reasons that couples may come to that decision. But I think what I wanted to focus on during this talk was really, what are some of the reasons that people choose to stay, even when deep down they may know that the relationship has broken down? I think that's, for me, was the significant aspect of what I wanted to talk about today. So what are some of the reasons people choose to stay in an unhappy relationship? Obviously, there's the finances to consider. You know, you may feel that you're not in a position to be able to support yourself, or there may already be financial constraints there. I've heard things, and we all have probably thought this, for those of that who have experienced a breakup of relationship, as, you know, we want to do this for the children. Sometimes marriage, that relationship, is our identity. And then, you know, it's, even if a relationship is unhealthy, there's a certain aspect of it being normal, and I put that in quotes, is that, you know, human beings fear change. You know, we fear being alone. We are creatures of community. We want to be a part of something. And equally, we don't want to hurt our family and friends, or even our partner at the time. So there's lots of reasons, and I've listed some of those here on the right. But I think what I wanted, before I wanted to talk a little bit about myself and how my own divorce story brought me to divorce coaching, and very specifically in this area. So my name is Salma Khan, and I'm an accredited divorce coach. And I work largely in supporting the South Asian community through the various stages of divorce. And a significant part of my work involves working through the feelings of shame, the cultural beliefs, and expectations that often form a part of our identity. So I'm a second generation Pakistani Muslim, brought up here in the UK. I would say that I had a fairly liberal upbringing and would not have considered myself to be hugely religious or even really culturally bound. I suppose I was what they would have considered a bit of a rebel in my community because I didn't really follow the norms. I got married in my late 20s and realized quite soon afterwards that I was incredibly unhappy. However, I chose to work on the marriage and, towards work, making things work. Despite knowing that I would have had the full support of my family to leave, I in fact spent a number of years in a very unhealthy and abusive relationship that eventually led to a decline in my mental and physical health. In fact, it took my family to actively step in before I decided to step out. And at the time, I was financially able to support myself. I had a stable and successful career. I had supportive family around me. But what made me stuck? It was the shame. It was a shame of realizing that this marriage that I had walked into was actually failing, and there was nothing that I was being able to do to salvage it. It was a shame of letting my parents down. It was a shame of having to face my community and say that I was actually filing for divorce. I was just stuck for many, many years. So I just wanted to sort of delve a little bit into exactly what shame is. And as many of you will be familiar with Brené Brown's work, she does a lot of work in the area of shame. And she refers to, she says, shame corrodes the very part of us that believes that we are capable of change. And I think that was incredibly relevant in my story. And it comes up time and time again for many of the clients that I work with. So the definition of shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. That's probably not the only definition, but it's the definition that, I think guilt and shame, sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between the two. Of course, when we're, thinking about leaving the relationship, there's always going to be an element of guilt there. The part that we've played or the impact it's going to have on the children and how our family is going to feel. But I think what is really significant when I, do further research into shame is the difference between where that sits within us, and I think the next line sums it up. Shame is saying I am bad. Guilt is just accepting that I've done something bad and I feel incredibly horrible about it. But shame is pointing inwards. It's pointing at us to say, if I make this decision, I am a bad person, I am horrible, I am selfish, or whatever it is that your internal critic is focused on at that point in time. And I think sometimes, if left unchallenged, cultural and religious beliefs can actually reinforce that, considering leaving a marriage actually makes you a bad person, not the fact that you may have made some, difficult decisions. So what are some of the things that influence our internal belief systems? Oh, I'm sorry. How do I go back? Yeah, there we go. The first IT glitch. Just gonna. I wanted to sort of, I was thinking about all of the things that I had assimilated around divorce, as you know, throughout my life. And I think we've probably all heard some of these at some point in time. We may not necessarily believe them. We may even be aware of the fact that they're not necessarily true. You know, one of the things that I really steps out for me is divorce is the most hated things in the eyes of God. This is something that I heard time and time again in my own upbringing, because it's a religious statement, which in some level is completely out of context. But at the time, I did not have the knowledge or the ability to look behind and actually research into what that meant. My upbringing had just imprinted this sentence into my identity, and that's the only thing that I could focus on. And it's only later on, when I started exploring these and questioning my beliefs, that I actually was able to understand that any sentence taken out of context can actually give you a completely different meaning. So, you know, generally divorce is seen as something negative across any culture, even in cultures where, you know, divorce is now acceptable. I think society still sees it as a failure of an individual or on a couple. So there's still that sense of shame. Although we are accepting of the divorce process, there is still that sense that actually we failed at something, or that person has failed at something. And in some cultures, divorce is still very much taboo, and is, you know, in some circumstances actually actively discouraged, even when there is abuse present. You know, we will still try to work on it and make it work, even though when all of the signs and all of the facts are pointing towards that we need to leave. And some of the things that reinforce that is the lack of support from family and communities, which will prevent us from speaking up. You know, if we know that leaving this relationship means that our family will just no longer be there for us in that context, you know, going out alone into the world is an incredibly scary concept. And, you know, I'm not saying it's not possible, it absolutely is, but it can keep us stuck in that frozen sort of demeanor where we just cannot see past that. You know, the shame of failing the expectations of families and our communities, the shame of being ostracized and judged for going against the community norms that we grew up not really questioning. And I think the shame of falling short of what we feel our religious beliefs were at that time. And the fears of failure, isolation, and loneliness. And I think through my work, what I've learned is that there are lots of norms and rules and regulations that we all like sort of abide by, no matter what religion or culture, community we live in. But just because they are deemed to be normal and acceptable doesn't necessarily make them right. And these need to be spoken about. We need to be able, you know, through platforms like this and people like myself and other people that advocate in this area, is to be able to speak about these topics so that we can remove the veil of shame. We can empower people so that they have someone that they can turn to, that can support them at a time when they may be feeling incredibly lonely and stuck in indecision. So how can we move forward when we're in that position? I think most importantly for me was to start questioning the beliefs that I held. And I think that's really important. You know, where is this shame and this sense of being stuck coming from? And Where did you first hear this, or where did you learn it? Is it even a fact, or is it a belief? Start doing your research. Is it true in our circumstances in today's world? You know, something held true maybe for 20, 30 years ago for the communities when they first came here to settle in the UK. Their circumstances, financial circumstances, different, family ties were completely different. Are they relevant in today's community? And most importantly is, what is the impact of holding on to that belief? What impact is it having on your health, on your mental, your physical health, even on the mental and physical health of your partner and your children? What is it? What I suppose, like, what is that belief serving in a positive way? Because if it's only causing us damage, then we need to be able to find the strength to start working towards destabilizing that belief, maybe replacing it with a different belief that is going to help us all move forward in a positive way. And again, what is the consequences of dealing with this belief? I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that it's easy to do this. I think it's something that we all have to focus on and work towards. And I think this is where the last point comes in, is, what additional support do we need around us to help us move forward? We may not be able to challenge our situation completely in isolation, but there is lots of help out there. We just need to reach out, whether it's to the professionals, the legal professionals, or the financial professionals, or coaches and therapists. It is so important that we're able to create that support around us to help us move on from this situation of just being stuck, because that's, it's an agonizing place to be, not knowing whether we can move forward. We can't go back. We're just stuck in limbo. And I suppose from that perspective, what's the difference that makes a difference? Be kind to yourself. Don't compare your circumstances to any other circumstances. Your situation is individual. And one of the things that often comes up with clients is, there's family pressures and community pressures to stay within that unhealthy situation. But actually, you are the one that is going home and dealing with that relationship. It can be much easier for people on the outside to not really completely understand where you are. And no one relationship can really be the same as any other. Every individual relationship has its own intricacies and issues. So it's really important that we don't compare. Get your support structure in place. Start reaching out, even if it's in very small ways. Start talking about these things, and understand that nobody's perfect, and we all make mistakes, and we all make bad decisions, and they don't make us bad people. We can learn from those bad mistakes. We can learn from those, wrong decisions that we made, or the circumstances that we found ourselves in. And I think that's where your strength comes, is to find the learnings in those decisions. And then we can look at what are the tiny things that we can change. We don't have to change overnight. We can start moving forward in small steps. And really important for that is to challenge our thoughts. What is it that we are constantly focusing on that we can start evolving? And I think really crucial to that, and I know that's something that anybody in the health sector will always talk about, is focusing on your mental and physical health. When we're going through a divorce, or we're contemplating divorce, it's an incredibly challenging time, both mentally, physically, emotionally. And if we're not looking after ourselves, and we're not sort of focusing on trying to get enough sleep, and trying to get a little bit of fresh air, and trying to eat properly, it makes those decisions that we have to make even more difficult to make, because we have the additional lack of energy and lack of clarity and confusion that is already heightened at that point in time. So thank you. That's sort of comes to the end of of my presentation. I hope that was of value to everybody that was listening, and open the floor up to any questions.
Any questions from anybody?
Salma, it strikes me, thank you, it was a really, really interesting talk. It strikes me that this applies to so many different areas. I was thinking about body image and how women often feel shamed in their marriage. And, you know, it's just so powerful to think about those questions. And
no, I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, it's across almost everything that we do. It has such a massive impact.
Salma, what would you say is the added impact of arranged marriages within the culture?
I think the difference, I think there's pros and cons to both. I think with the arranged marriage, with generally, I suppose in the South Asian community, marriage isn't just between two people. It's not just the husband and wife. It's actually a fusion of two families. And we're talking aunties and uncles and grandparents and second uncles. It's not just, you know, your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. That we are talking that whole fusion of families. So when the marriage is breaking down, there is sometimes it's about separating two families. And, you know, sometimes with arranged marriages, not usually, in some cases, they are arranged through mutual friendships or mutual even relationships. They could, you know, the families could in some way be related. So there becomes a huge pressure in that sense, is that if the marriage breaks down, it has the potential to sort of break those family ties completely or impact the friendship. So it runs much deeper than just the couple separating. So it just adds to that pressure and makes it even a much bigger consideration, and, you know, can really sort of impact that. And I think the alternative, you know, if you haven't had an arranged marriage and you've sort of gone, I'll say against the grain, because it is becoming much more normal now to, you know, marry out of choice. And I think then you may have the pressure that actually I made this choice. I went against what, you know, the norms were, and now it isn't working out. Now I have to go and face the world and say, well, actually, I made this choice and it's not quite worked out the way I wanted to. So I think there's pros and cons to both sides. Not to say that in an arranged marriage, you're going to go and blame your parents, but I think in some ways, there's less of a responsibility there.
And what about if often the bride has been brought into the UK from the family abroad? What would you say are the added impacts of that?
I think it depends on her individual circumstances, but yes, you're creating a dependent, you know, it's massive dependency there. You're bringing somebody into a foreign country. It's going to take time for them to adjust and acclimatize. You know, do they even speak the language? Do they have an education where they may be able to support themselves here in the UK should they need to in the future? So all of these factors have a massive influence over that. You know, if you have come from abroad, your education may not be, I suppose, may not allow you to practice in your field here in the UK, especially if you know, maybe there might be something that you need to sort of do a top-up course or an additional course to allow you to practice in your field. So it can leave you in a really financially vulnerable position if you do find yourself in a place where, you know, you're not able to support yourself. And again, and also, you know, you don't have the support of your immediate family and friends. You know, you are assimilating into the family that you're marrying into. They are your support structure. They are your sort of family and your friends for that period that you're married, because very often your own family will be hundreds of miles away.
Yeah. And if such a marriage breaks down, should the immigration lawyer be part of the support network?
It depends, yeah, on the length. I suppose there is a and it would depend whether at what stage they have their own immigration status. Because if they've been here for a certain number of years, they will have the right to stay here regardless. But yes, I think absolutely that is something that they would need to research into and look into quite early on, so that they are aware of the situation that they may potentially find themselves in.
Yeah, it's really useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? There was a message in the chat from ASP Network saying, thank you, very, very interesting, especially for our network as Asian single parents.
Thank you.
And another one from another delegate, very interesting, thank you. So any other questions from anybody? Any observations from anyone? That you wanted to say something then, Julia?
Oh, just to say thank you very much to Salma. I think it was great, and I could resonate with so much of what she says, and just very grateful for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you go off and have a lovely holiday with your lovely son.
I will do. They're all waiting outside for me. So thank you. And I hope the rest of it goes well, and I will catch up on the recordings.
Lovely.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye. So we're moving into another short break, and the next talk starts at 11:45, where we're going to be hearing from Sheila about breaking up without breaking down. Sheila is a mental health nurse, so she's got loads of expertise in this field, and she's also one of our DCA graduates.